At last! Henry was right. But 7 years. 7 years!
Lie thou there. 7 years. Well, it didn't help Jagged dying in the middle of the printing. And that typesetter. A drink, I think, would be the order of the day. And so here it is. My gift to the future. Our gift, sorry, Henry. Yes, and Edward and Isaac and all of you. I raise my glass to you all. And to Ben, too. And what was it he said? Ah, yes. Not of an age, but for all time. I have done nothing but in care of thee, my dear one, thee, my daughter, who art ignorant of what thou art, not knowing of whence I am, nor that I am more better than Prospero, master of a full poor cell, and thy no greater father. And I, gentle Will, have done nothing but in care of thee. Art ignorant of what thou art? Oh, that was young Will. I said so often that his plays would be remembered. I don't think he ever believed me. My poems, my sonnets, yes, well, I can't but hope. But the plays, Green was probably right, an upstart crow, he called me. Ah, poor Will. He was so young at the time, and that stung him to the quick. Poets are so sensitive. But now his plays are all printed, ready to be handed down to the generations that will follow. I remember when I first mentioned this to Henry. Who will pay £1 for such a book? Ever practical Henry, if not always the most cheerful in nature. Of course, I could not explain to him, or to the Jaggards either. 7 years it took us. Oh, well, what's 7 years compared to eternity? Eternity, the future. How shall I know? I have to know. I must ask the future. I'm an old man, and I have to know. Ghosts of the future, tell me, was it all in vain? The Ghosts of the Future. Where's that from? No, it's not Hamlet. Well, maybe it's for another poet to coin. Heaven knows I am no poet. Ghosts of the future, I conjure you, appear thou in the likeness of a sigh, approach, come, the fringed curtains of thine eye advance, and say what thou seest yond. The devil! Where am I?
Your current location is London South Bank, adjacent to the Globe Theatre.
Who are you?
I am the voice of the future.
The future? What year is it?
The year is 2023.
That's 400 years from now. Oh, there is the globe. But it is much changed.
The current Globe Theatre was built in 1996.
What witchcraft is this? A window? Pictures of people moving? Wait, there is something written. Zoom meeting in progress. What is Zoom?
Zoom is a video conferencing platform that can be used through a computer.
Computer. What is a computer?
A computer is a programmable device for processing, displaying, and storing information.
Information? Then my disembodied friend, you must know the answer to this question. Who was William Shakespeare?
William Shakespeare was an English poet, playwright, and actor born in 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon. His works have been translated into every known language, and he remains the most popular playwright of all time.
The most pop of all time? But this is my doing. But for me, most of these plays would have been lost. William Shakespeare's comedies, histories, and tragedies. 18 of them would never have been printed without this book. 7 years. And all this time I've been wondering, but what about the man? No, do not answer that. Let me tell you about him. It is 1623. Young Will died 7 years ago. He was not concerned about printing them. He said he wrote them for us, the players. I treated him many times to print them, but he always refused. Now, wait. This is what he believed. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school, and then the lover, sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. He wrote that for himself, you know. May I tell you about him? Perhaps you know the name, but what about the man? For me, it all started back in 1587. I was aged 21 and a player with the Queen's Men, and we were touring throughout the counties of Oxfordshire and Warwickshire. We were successful. We had with us the best clown of the time, Richard Tarleton, and his fame guaranteed our success everywhere we played. But on the 13th of June, tragedy struck. I will never forget that night. We had in our company a hothead, wonderful player, but when the drink was in him, oh dear. William Nell was his name. In Tame, he started an argument with another of our players, John Town. The reason for the argument shall best perhaps remain discreetly unspoken. We tried to calm them both, but John was frightened when William drew upon him, and in the ensuing confusion, John's sword finished in the neck of the unfortunate William. We lost not only a friend, but also our young hero. That is a difficult situation when you're on tour. Our next date was in a town called Stratford-upon-Avon. We were well known in the town, and our performance was eagerly awaited. When we arrived that summer, one of the aldermen, John Shakespeare, a glovemaker by trade, welcomed us, and we were to be lodged in the White Swan, the tavern next to his house. Young Will was his son, and he joined us as we ate. We talked late into that night, and I found his company most pleasing. I was most impressed by the way he spoke and his way of coining phrases. He reminded me of that other unfortunate William, and here I shall permit another boast. It was I who suggested that he should join us. His wife was present at the play, and afterwards, when he announced that he would be leaving with us, she gave him one of those long, resigned looks that only the wife of an artist is capable of. Then she turned and walked away, and not a further spoken word was exchanged between them for many years, although they corresponded regularly. His father was furious. An alderman's son, a player, a wounding shame. I feared that there would be violence, but finally, faced with young Will's determination, he accepted on one condition: that young Will would never, ever sully the family name by letting anybody in Stratford know of the shameful profession he was to follow. A promise that young Will kept to his dying day. Honour and keeping your word were very dear to young Will. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones, so let it be with Caesar. We returned to the road with our new young hero. We toured, and young Will continued to write. He very soon developed his own style and way of writing. His ambition to put our country's history on stage meant that he spent much of his time studying the Holinshed, and particularly the wars of the houses of Lancaster and York. Oh, young Will knew the history, and how he made theatre of it. Richard II, Richard III, the Henrys. By 1594, two companies had emerged, Lord Chamberlain's men and the Admiral's men. We went to James Burbage's theatre in Shoreditch, and the others went to the Rose in Southwark with Philip Henslow. Finally, we had a constant company and a theatre to play in. And what a company! Our leading man, Richard Burbage, was the most powerful presence on the stage. Will Kemp, a clown of the most extraordinary talents, well, though he could not compare to Richard Darlton to my mind. Phillips, Pope, Brian, Cowley, Cook, my apprentice, and myself, of course. We could hire men too, and all our boy apprentices became more and more experienced. So now, when young Will was writing, he could write to the talents of his players. He had been writing all the time since leaving Stratford. Oh, I remember one afternoon in his rooms looking at the bundles of papers. It all seemed such confusion. But he assured me that when the play was ready, all would be in order. Oh, as indeed it was. Each time he presented us with our scripts, there, in front of our eyes, as we read, was a personage, complete, ready to play. For Burbage, the great tragic roles, as powerful as the man himself. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I! Is it not monstrous that this player here, but in a fiction, in a dream of passion, could force his soul so to his own conceit, that from her working all his visage wand, tears in his eyes, distraction in his aspect, a broken voice, and his whole function suiting with forms to his conceit, and all for nothing? For Hecuba? For Kemp? The clowns. When my cue comes, call me, and I will answer. For Cook, the ladies. I left no ring with her. What means this lady? Fortune forbid my outside have not charmed her. For me, the kings and dukes, the authority figures. Rebellious subjects, enemies to peace, profaners of this neighbour stained steel, will they not hear? What ho, you men, you beasts, that quench the fire of your pernicious rage. By now, young Will's dream of putting England's history on stage was complete, at least on the shelves of his rooms. Now, as we were installed in James Burbage's theatre at Shoreditch, I suggested to the company that we should start to include them in our repertoire. Oh, and I was right. The success of these plays reminded me of the days of Richard Tarleton. But our theatre was in danger. James Burbage's lease on the land had run out, and thanks to our success, Giles Allen demanded an excessive increase to continue it. No, we were not to be trifled with in this way. We had a promise of another plot of land, south of the river, near Henslow's Rose Theatre. So, on the night of the 28th of December, 1598, we performed the most audacious act ever seen in the theatrical world. We stole the building. Have you ever heard of a group of players physically stealing the theatre from the landlord? In 400 years, has this feat ever been repeated? We called our new theatre the Globe, a name that seemed appropriate to our position and our work, and we opened it with young Will's version of Henry V. Much changed and improved from the version that he had read to me in Stratford, those 10 years earlier. For the opening performance, which was packed to the gills, young Will wrote a chorus that he played with such vigour that Henry Condell and I decided to keep it when we prepared the plays. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, laced in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. May I permit another boast? It fell to me to manage the affairs of our company, a talent which came to me naturally, and my reputation for honesty and good housekeeping remains with me to this day. The result for us, the Chamberlain's men, was that we obtained the best hired men in London at the time. Philip Henslow was continually trying to poach our players and to offer them contracts, but his reputation for double dealing rendered his efforts in vain. Young Will was rightly acknowledged for his plays, but principally for his poetry. And he was solicited by many different people, men and women alike. William Herbert, Earl of Pembroke, was an ardent follower of plays and very appreciative of young Will's talents. It was he who took us under his protection in 1592 when we had to leave London because of the plague. Even though young Will had an eye for the ladies, and they for him, he never forgot his wife and family. In 1596, his son died at the age of 11. He returned to Stratford to be there at the end. Grief fills up the room of my absent child. Lies in his bed, walks up and down with me, puts on his pretty looks, repeats his words, remembers me of all his gracious parts, stuffs out his vacant garments with his form. Then have I reason to be fond of grief. The following year, he bought a large house for his wife and daughters. His appetite for books was unbounded. he could read a book in a matter of hours, retain the essential elements, and they would be incorporated into his plays at later dates. He had a capacity to absorb everything in literary material and use it. I remember the day he discovered Montaigne. His French was good, though imperfect. But Southampton had a tutor named John Florio, with whom young Well was on good terms. Montaigne's particular style of writing meant that when Florio decided to translate the essays, it was natural that he should ask young Will to participate. Although he did not, I suspect that Florio called on young Will's ability to coin phrases. When the books were printed, and when the translation was printed, young Will gave me a copy with a rather quizzical look which he had signed. I read it avidly, and I noticed that from that day on, all the plays were influenced to a greater or lesser extent by the Frenchman. I've lost that book. Oh well. Most of it remains here, in my head, and in the plays.
Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast, and their adoption tried, grapple them to thy soul with hoops of steel, but do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new-hatched, unfledged comrade. Beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, bear it that the opposed may beware of thee.
And so many of the other plays, Measure for Measure, King Lear, Macbeth, they all show signs of Montaigne's ruminations. And most markedly, for me, young Will's last and greatest masterpiece, The Tempest. He too felt that he had achieved his greatest work, and, much to our distress, announced he was to retire and return to Stratford. He felt that he had neglected Anne too long, and was tired and it has to be said, rich. He'd invested his money wisely, and he wanted to enjoy his wealth. Who can find fault with that? Young Will died 3 years later, in 1616. I went with Henry, I think, yes, to be there at the end. As he lay on his deathbed, I promised him that I would have the plays printed. And he finally accepted the idea. And now, you, my friends, must be his guardians. On my return to London, I immediately started to collect as many of the Q scripts as possible, oftentimes having to persuade the players to part with the scripts for them to be copied. There were still, in many instances, the prompt books, but again they had to be copied as they were needed in the theatre on playing days. All this took us some years, and indeed there were some plays we were unable to complete. Did I tell you that I married William Nell's widow, Rebecca? No? She was just 16 that fateful day in Tame. We lived happily and we had many children. But she too departed 4 years ago. That's when I came to live here, next to the globe. Richard is gone, as is Augustine, Alexander. Oh, I'm starting to feel alone. But this will sustain me in my old age, as will you, my friends and fellow guardians. You cannot imagine how much of a comfort it will be knowing that young Will lives on. And so we must part. Remember me. And please continue to spread young Will's name. I am old and will shuffle off this mortal coil in time. May I leave you with his words. Since brass nor stone nor earth nor boundless sea, but sad mortality o'ersways their power, how with this rage shall beauty hold a plea whose action is no stronger than a flower? Oh, how shall summer's honey breath hold out against the wreckful siege of battering days, when rocks impregnable are not so stout, nor gates of steel so strong, but time decays? Oh, fearful meditation, where, alack, shall time's best jewel from time's chest lie hid? Or what strong hand can hold this swift foot back? Or who his spoil of beauty can forbid? Oh, none, unless this miracle have might, that in black ink my love may still shine bright, and that in black ink Will's love doth still shine bright.